All right, everybody, we're back here with MacroBioBoi doing another React video. This time we're looking at operator orders, the Diablo 4 this breaks neck. No, I'm not actually doing React content, but the reason why I'm showing you this video, which I will link in the description, it's a really good video. Operator order is talking about changes that are coming in the PTR and their impact on how the Wither legendary node works in Diablo 4. For people who are unaware, basically, for damage over time effects, we have a legendary node that we can go pick up that says every single time that you do damage over time, you have a chance to basically crit. And this scales off of your intelligence. And Otter and I have actually talked about this video because I did watch it live on stream. But there was one thing that Operator Otter had pointed out that I believe to be fundamentally untrue. And I just wanted to say, also, why am I still up here? Hold on, let me move me. But the thing that I thought was fundamentally untrue was the concept of breakpoints right here. The idea that there was a breakpoint in how Wither worked, because that would be incredibly inconsistent with the logic of the Paragon board. Because it turns out that this does have breakpoints. And other things don't have breakpoints. But then they added breakpoints to stuff in the PTR that didn't have breakpoints before. And there's still other stuff that doesn't have breakpoints. Let's go ahead and talk about what a breakpoint is, how this relates to the Paragon system, why I think it's not necessarily a bug, but an inconsistency in the coding logic, like between the designer and the code writer. They said, hey, it works like this. And they said, literally, okay, cool, we'll go ahead and do that. And hopefully in my reporting this to the developers, we at least get a consistency in how the Paragon board works, because right now you literally can't intuit what it should do at any given time, because every single thing that has similar verbiage all works differently. Let's go ahead and talk about breakpoints themselves. So when you look up breakpoints in games, what you get is noun, a situation in tennis in which receiving player can win the game by scoring the next point. So obviously that's incredibly relevant to Diablo 4. But more specifically, we obviously have to go to the wisdom of Urban Dictionary. But the idea of a breakpoint is in a game where a breakpoint is a stat that a character reaches to gain some value or to activate something or to change some way in which a system works. The example that they use here is how many attacks it would require to kill a monster. So let's say a monster has 1,000 life, and I do 333.33 repeating, of course, amounts of damage. Shoutouts to Leroy Jenkins. And the idea here is that it would take me 3 attacks to kill that monster. Increasing my damage to 400 wouldn't decrease how many attacks it takes, right? Because I would do 400 damage, then I would do 800 damage, and my third attack, I would do 1,200 damage, but the monster would die at 1,000. So there I still need 3 attacks to kill this monster. If I increase my damage to 500, I've reached the next breakpoint where it only takes 2 attacks to kill a monster. And you understand this concept moving forward from there. There's breakpoints in the vast majority of things in video games. In Diablo 2, there were breakpoints for how fast you could cast spells. That's the idea of a breakpoint in a video game. Now, our next example of breakpoints is in fact not a breakpoint at all, but let's go ahead and read the verbiage of our glyphs, something that you interact with all of the time and may have never sat down and really looked at the numbers and gone, what am I doing here? You kind of just max them out and you get the biggest damage number possible, right? But the verbiage for this says, for every 5 dexterity purchased within range, I'm going to gain 19.8 damage for critical strike damage, right? So I currently have 10. You can see the 10 in red down there at the bottom. And that means I'm getting 2 times 19.8. And that's how you get up to 39.6 damage. And this makes sense. Every single node adds on 5 dexterity when I actually activate it, and I get an additional total 19.8 damage, right? So 3 times 5 is 15. 3 times 19.8 is 59.4. This logic breaks down, though, when we pick up the magic nodes. The magic nodes have 7 dexterity. And in fact, if you were to max out how much of a stat you have in any given range, the only ones that typically tend to max out are intelligence, at least on the Necromancer, because they only have 5s and 10s. There are no +7 intelligence on the Necromancer for intelligence, right? But what happens when I put in this 7 dexterity node? Let's go ahead and look, and I now have 87.1 critical strike damage. Well, let's go ahead and do the math very quickly. If it's actually just 4 sets of 5, that's basically just 4 times 20 minus 4 times 0.2. That's just how my brain does math. I don't know how you do the math. But what that should be is a whopping 79.2 damage. That's what 19.8 times 4 would be. And just to highlight that, this is what it looks like when I do have 20 dexterity. I get exactly 79.2, the thing that I said. But if I put in 7 dexterity, I get more than that. And why is it? Well, even though it says for every 5 dexterity. What this actually should say is for every 1 dexterity within range, increase your critical strike damage by roughly 4, right? So it's like 20 divided by 5 gets you roughly 4. So this clearly doesn't work off of breakpoints, even though it very specifically says that it should. Now, maybe it's a verbiage thing, because it turns out that there are other nodes in the Paragon board that have different verbiage, even though they seemingly work off the same logic. The Cult Leader legendary node says that your minions deal 15% bonus damage for each 20 of attack speed bonus they have. Reading that out loud, it's like a really weird mouthful, right? Your minions deal 15% multiplicative increased damage for each 20% of attack speed. Wild. Now, what's the difference here? So this says increased damage for each 20%. This says for every 5 dexterity. Now, do we think that this works on breakpoints? Do I need to hit 20% increased bonus attack speed before they gain 15% damage multiplier? No, not at all. In Season 3, right now, if you had 10% bonus attack speed on your minions, they would gain 7.5 or half of this total damage multiplier. It does not work off of breakpoints. Every 1% of attack speed that you have increases how much damage this deals. Except for the fact that in the PTR, this actually doesn't work this way anymore. It's now based off of breakpoints. While I've not personally tested myself, I know that GMS and Sanctuary has, shoutouts to CTOD, and they made me aware of the fact that this now works off of breakpoints. The funny part being that it also doesn't have a cap, even though it says it has a cap. So you can continue to give your minions attack speed, and they will continue to gain damage multipliers, but you have to hit the breakpoint before it matters. Like right now, if you had 15% bonus attack speed and it worked off of breakpoints like it did in the PTR, you gain literally nothing. And I don't think anybody expects that you would gain nothing from this node, even though you clicked it and you have stats to empower it. But that's a whole other issue with the fact that they changed Cult Leader over to this, whereas every other legendary node just gives you power for clicking it. I'm not sure if I'm going to make a whole video about it, but like, oh, I do really hate that. But back to the original topic, Cult Leader and your glyphs already have an internal logic that is similar. For getting the stat that they reference, you gain the bonus, and whatever amount of that stat that you have is really just your coefficient that you divide your value by, right? Now, what about the fact that I talked about Wither from Operator Otter's video? And how does that somehow have breakpoints when this doesn't have breakpoints and this doesn't have breakpoints? Well, because screw us, I guess. I actually can't think of like a really good reason for why this works this way. Wither node is very interesting. It allows your shadow damage to proc as if it could crit. It's not really like critting. It doesn't take into account critical strike damage, but increasing how much intelligence you have for every 60 intelligence. So if you get 59 intelligence, it does nothing. If you get 61 intelligence, it doesn't do any more. No, you need to hit it in increments of 60 intelligence. You not only increase the bonus damage that it grants, but also the chance that it procs. It makes it very powerful to invest in this because making it happen more often is the largest overall multiplier of its damage. And then on top of that, it is a damage multiplier. So it's not like it's additive damage or anything like that. So let's just go ahead and look at a very quick test that you can do to see how this works. And I'll just show you some very simple math and a very quick equation that you can just kind of put together so you get an idea of it. And then I'll touch back on why I think this is a problem. So right now my character has 227 intelligence. You'll notice that 227 intelligence doesn't easily divide by 60, right? It would go 60, 120, 180, and then 240. So I'm currently between the 180 and 240 breakpoints. And even though I'm really close to 240, I've effectively gained nothing other than the inherent bonus that intelligence grants to skills, right? So you get 10% of your intelligence as a multiplier to your skill damage. So investing in intelligence will make you do more damage. But for this test, we're going to go ahead and use Blood Wave. The reason why we're using Blood Wave is one, I can very quickly reset its cooldown with Blood Orb, so I can do this consistently. But two, Blood Wave has no variance to its damage. If I were to just cast Blood Wave right now, I'm going to be doing 1892 damage. You'll notice that, oh, right there, I just did 3066. That was a crit from the Wither node. So it's actually really nice. I was hoping that I wouldn't have to record too much of this, but every single time that I cast Blood Wave, right now, it will always do that 1892, and then it will always crit for that 3066. And I'll just show you it again. 1892, maybe we get a crit. There we go. Perfect. Thank you, video game. Wow, you're doing so well for me right now. But that 3066 damage will always crit in that way. Why does Bloodwave, for whatever reason, just have absolutely no variance in its damage? I don't know. It should. Like every other proc has variance in it. I don't know why this doesn't have variance in it, but it doesn't have variance in it, and it makes it very easy to test this thing. Welcome to the datasheet. Everybody loves a good datasheet. I'm just going to go through what I put here very quickly, but it's a very, very simple test. One, I just brought down the base damage as it's written in the tooltip. I included my intelligence value and the expected skill damage increase from my intelligence. After that, we run the test, right? We go, how much damage does it do to the target? You notice that it did that 1892 damage. And then when it crit, how much damage did it do? It did 3066 damage. Now, our damage without intelligence. What is our base damage without intelligence? It's very simple. You just take the damage that we're doing and you divide it by 1 plus the bonus that we get from intelligence divided by 100. Why do you have to do that? Because it has to be in a decimal format. So it's basically a 22% damage increase. So that's a 1.22 multiplier of your damage. So that's just to get an idea of what the base is so that we can extrapolate to what it should be later on. And you'll notice that the difference between how much damage we dealt versus how much damage we dealt when we crit was a 1.62 total multiplier of our damage here. So if I go look at our breakpoints, and what we got, we're sitting at the 180 breakpoint because we don't have enough to reach 240. We have an 8% chance of proccing this skill, and we have a 62% damage bonus from Wither. And if I were to go show you that in game, it's exactly what the tooltip says. Perfect. Mac, what's the problem here? The tooltip matches a thing for once in its entire life. You're not wrong. The issue being that, again, this is not how glyphs work. And it's not even how other Paragon nodes in our boards that say they have breakpoints work. Nothing else works like this. Why does it have a breakpoint? Well, before we even prove that, let's go ahead and prove that there is a breakpoint in the first place, right? So to reach the next breakpoint, this is going to give me a 9% chance of proccing. It's going to increase my damage by 66%. I need to reach 240 intelligence. Luckily, that's pretty easy in the Paragon board. So if we go up to this node right here, here's some intelligence all around. That's an additional 20 intelligence. If I go back to my character, I now have 247 intelligence. So here with our expectation, 247 intelligence, going to give us an increase in damage of 24.7. The expected damage output that I should get from this is the base damage that we were already doing over here, multiplied by 1 plus our bonus from intelligence divided by 100. And what we expect to see is 1922 damage. Now, obviously, the game can't show us floating decimal values here. It only shows us integer values. Whether or not it's actually only doing integer damage, it's not something that I personally know. In Diablo 2, a lot of people think that the game can't do integer damage, which is just strictly incorrect. Health values are actually calculated based off of a floating decimal. That's how you're able to do poison bitrate damage. And on top of that, the damage that you see on your screen has always been rounded, and you can actually hit somebody for 5 damage twice, and it won't do a total of 10 damage to them. It's very funny. But back to Diablo 4 here. Let's go ahead and see what our damage output is from using Bloodwave with this increase in intelligence, and then hopefully we also see a crit. So here we go. I do my little Bloodwave. I'm now doing 1923 damage, and we actually did get a crit there as well. But let's go ahead and look back at our datasheet. And you'll notice that our real damage was 1923, which if I were to take down how many sig figs are here, we would round up to 1923, but I did just want you to see what it looked like, what the calculation showed. And then our crit damage was 3192 damage. On top of that, if you take that and you divide it in, what do you get? 66% damage increase here, which is exactly what you expect from the breakpoint. Okay, cool. Why does this matter to you? Well, the biggest issue is that based off of how you can very easily show in-game bonuses that you gain and expect outcomes, you actually can't rely on testing one thing even when it has the exact same verbiage as something else. And just to very quickly touch on it again, while your glyph says for every 5 dexterity, there are no breakpoints here, whereas the verbiage here says for each 60 intelligence. Now you may argue that again, the verbiage is different, has different logic. But for Cult Leader, currently in Season 3, it also says for each number that you reach, and this doesn't have breakpoints, but instead in the PTR was changed to have breakpoints, meaning that until you reach the amount that's on the Paragon node, you literally gain no bonus from it even though you invested the points in to be able to reach it. Now, how wild bananas is that? Let's go ahead and look at every other legendary node that the Necromancer has access to and realize why this is so silly. 1. Hulking Monstrosity. Your golem has 40% increased maximum life and 100% increased damage. No breakpoints. When you click that legendary node, you double how much damage it does, and you give it a 1.4 multiplier of its maximum life. Flesh Eater. When you consume 5 corpses, you get a 40% damage multiplier here. I guess you could argue there's a breakpoint in how many corpses you need to consume. That's not really what that is called. It's actually just like an activation cost, which is technically derivative of time taken to be able to activate. So you can do math there. But again, not a breakpoint. It's just if you do this, you get the damage. Scent of Death. If you got 2 corpses near you, you got damage reduction. If you have no corpses near you, you do more damage. Again, no breakpoint. There's an activation variable, which is what state is the Necromancer in. You're like Schrodinger's corpse hoarder here. But again, no breakpoint. You just get it or you get it. Bone Graft. Hitting enemies increases how much damage you do and how much maximum essence you have, which on bone skills increases how much damage you do. Blood begets blood. You pick up a blood orb, you get more damage. And Bloodbath. You just do more damage with overpower. That's it. If you overpower, you do more damage. Why would it ever be that Wither, which at least gives you a benefit just for clicking it, a 5% chance to crit and then a 50% damage multiplier when you crit, at the very least gives you something from when you click it. But again, every 60 intelligence you reach is going to increase this effect, and any intelligence before that does nothing for the node. Now, it's still going to increase your, resistances that you grant. It's still going to give you additional skill damage. It's not like dead stats all of a sudden, but it doesn't affect this legendary node until you hit these breakpoints. And there will be realities where we can never reach the next breakpoint just because it's physically impossible to get more intelligence onto your build. So any intelligence over it is effectively wasted, depending on how much of an investment it takes to get that intelligence. And again, here with Cult Leader, didn't have a breakpoint before, but now does in the PTR, which means that until you reach a certain amount of attack speed, you just get nothing from clicking this node. And I mean literally nothing. Like, that's not hyperbolic. Until you reach the breakpoint, you get nothing. So yeah, Wither node does have breakpoints. And I just want to say again, shout outs to Operator Otter. I was not aware of that. I did not think that it worked that way because it wouldn't make sense for it to work that way, because it would be an anomaly that is completely different than everything else that currently works in the Paragon board. And I have reported this logical inconsistency to the developers, because if there's going to be an inconsistency, I'm not necessarily super worried about getting more damage or being more powerful or doing something like that. Again, the thing just should work the same way, regardless of what part of the system that you're touching on, right? If it's going to have a breakpoint, it needs to say that it has breakpoints. If it says that it has breakpoints, but it doesn't actually, it needs to stop saying that it has breakpoints. If it didn't have breakpoints before and it does have breakpoints now, that should probably be cataloged somewhere. That shouldn't be something we have to discover. But there you go. If you want to check out Operator Otter's video, again, it's down in the description. I recommend going and doing it because he is quite right. Blight is absolutely going to be the most powerful build. Theoretically, even if they fixed the absolutely bugged Ebon Piercer necklace, and I think the only thing that'll go toe-to-toe with it is minions. And that's something that I was saying early on in the PTR, and it's just wild bananas, the type of damage that you can get out of the build. If you're brand new here, or if you're a returning viewer and you haven't already, go ahead and subscribe to the channel just so you don't miss out on any of this, so you can stay as up-to-date as possible with all the absolute nonsense that goes on in the world of the Necromancer, so you can enjoy Season 4 to the best of your ability. Toss a like onto the video as well, and if you had any questions, ideas, thoughts, think I could have done something better, think that you found something interesting, go ahead and share them down in the comments below, or join the Discord that's linked in the description. As always, thank you so much for watching this video. I hope that helped you out, and I look forward to seeing you in the next one.